All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Raw Intuition Health Show. It is an honor to be with you again on this Sunday. Thank you for always being here with us. Today we have another incredible guest and an incredible show that I know you're gonna love. It's somebody that I have admired for many years now. I've been watching him from the shadows. I've never actually met him until now, so it's been an honor to learn the information that he's been putting out. It's always, great information, and it'll definitely add to your knowledge base. So I definitely recommend you go check him out. His name is Mike Perrine, and he is from the EveryDay Detox Academy. And in this discussion today, in this episode, we're going to be discussing essential things to consider when thinking about doing a cleanse or a detox. All right. So, a lot of times I see people just randomly jumping into these different things without having a full understanding of how to really optimize the experience. And so I know Mike is an expert in this field. He's been doing this for decades. And so we're going to get his expertise on this topic. And I think it's going to be an amazing discussion. A little background on Mike. He is a detoxification consultant, certified colon hydrotherapist, certified holistic health counselor, and the owner of Ashland Gravity Colonics and Vitality NYC. Over the last 22 years, Mike has performed over 25,000 colonic irrigations and supervised thousands of people through various methods of internal cleansing, including fasting, colon cleansing, and liver flushing. He has also studied nutritional science and diet philosophies at the Natural Gourmet Institute for Food and Health and the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And he is also the host of another incredible podcast called EveryDay Detox Podcast. I highly recommend you check it out. All the links to Mike's resources are down in the description box of this video, so please go follow him and check out his resources. Let's get Mike in here. What's up, Mike? Thanks for being here.
Matt, thank you. What a great introduction. Thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for being here and sharing your time with us. Everybody, we got started a little late, so we apologize for that. But, these things tend to happen on this show quite frequently, so I know you're probably all used to it. And thank you for funneling in here. Hopefully people aren't still sitting in the previous video, but I'm sure they'll figure it out here soon. Yeah, so as I was mentioning, today we're going to be talking about how to optimize your detox or cleansing experience and things to, be aware of, important factors to consider when thinking about doing a cleanse or doing a detox, things like that to help you guys, kind of navigate that kind of arena in the best way. All right. And so, as always, stick around to the Q&A at the end, and we're going to do a giveaway to somebody that asks a question. If you do enter a question in the chat box ahead of the Q&A, please put like 3 or 4 question marks in front of your question so that it's easy to go back and take a look at that. But otherwise, hold your questions to the Q&A. And somebody that asks a question, as always, we're going to do a giveaway. And so I will be giving away a free copy of one of my ebooks. So you can get your choice, either 21-day raw transformation program, 5-star salad revolution, or 5-star digestion. And Daily Green Boost has been generous enough to give me a few codes to give out. And so somebody that is going to also win a free bottle of Daily Green Boost, and you'll have 2 weeks to put in that code into their website to get your free bottle. So, and then on top of that, so this is like an extravaganza here for you guys. Mike is also going to be giving access to his Cleansing Kitchen Essentials course. Mike, do you want to just kind of give a little highlights of what that entails?
Yeah, Cleansing Kitchen Essentials is one of the food prep classes at EveryDay Detox Academy, and it's sort of a growing course. So right now, I don't remember how many recipes are in it, but I used to give it away for free. Then I started selling it for $1. Then I started selling it for like 20 something dollars, then $32. And then I don't know where we're at with the price now, but the price goes up all the time. But once you buy in, you're in for life on that course. So no matter how many recipes we add, you're just going to keep getting them as time goes by. And interestingly enough, more people purchased and completed that course when we started charging more money for it than just the $1, because people don't really value it. They're usually given, with something that's cheap, they don't value. But as soon as people started paying more money, everybody started completing that course and making that food. So it's a very popular one. So I hope whoever gets it enjoys it and you have it for life.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much for offering that. That's very generous, and I'm excited for anybody out there to get that. Yeah, and also I always forget to mention this, but if you're watching, if you could please hit the like button, that really helps us out. So just tap that button if you feel like it. And yeah, so we can get started here. So as always, as we start most shows here, Mike, if you can give just like a background on yourself, how you got into this lifestyle, how did you get into being a colon hydrotherapist? How did that all work itself out?
Yeah, it's an interesting story because, that profession, there was not necessarily a booth at the job fair for a colon hydrotherapist. And it's something I never thought I would be doing. And when I did start doing it, I never thought it would be a 23 plus year career at that point. So, real quick, because I've told my story a lot of times on a lot of podcasts, but I grew up in New York City. And when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, I came from an amazing family, but there was just a lot of bad influences in the youth culture in regards to access to substances and alcohol and cigarettes and all that kind of stuff. And also the world was different then. I mean, Sunday was at Nana's house and they'd all be eating food, playing cards at the table, and the table was just a cloud of smoke and everyone would have a drink. And it's just, that's what people did in 1982, 85. And it's a different thing. So, I was joking around. I was telling my wife, because we have young children, I was like, I used to, when I would get candy from the store, I would get Big League Chew, fake cigarettes, fake cigars. Like that's what they would sell kids.
Yeah.
Like they were bubblegum cigarette, they were candy cigarettes, and it was like, bubblegum chew, like the chewing tobacco.
I loved those.
Yeah. So, those influences were there, and I went right for them for some reason, just completely addictive behavior. As soon as I had autonomy over what my food choices were, and my family tried their best, but we did eat processed cereal, and we had a lot of pizza and pasta. I'm from Staten Island. So, that was the vibe, a lot of processed food in the 80s and stuff. So, but as soon as I had autonomy to do what I wanted, I just went right for the most indulgent stuff of smoking cigarettes from the age of 12, started drinking really early, started drinking 5 to 6 days a week, blackout drunk a lot of the time when I was a teenager. And by the age of 18, 19, I really destroyed myself. And not only physically, I should have been at my prime, but I was at my worst. I have pictures I post on social media all the time of my before and after. But, also just like spiritually, emotionally, like very lost, like really just getting, influenced by a lot of the wrong influences. Indulgence was king back then. Rock stars were glorified. Where I'm from, I thought it was more of a world thing, but it's not, or at least a nation thing. But the mafia life was glorified and doing things illegally to make money, and there was just a lot of that where I was from. So I was getting taken in the wrong direction. But I used to get real grossly sick from drinking and indulgent eating all the time. Drinking 40 ounces of malt liquor and passing out drunk with cheese fries and stuff on me at 2:00 in the morning. So at a certain point during the week, I couldn't party like that anymore. And I was in my parents' basement and I found a book, and it was a very intimidating looking book, but something I considered a spiritual experience. Something lit up in me and I said, I have to read this book. And this book is so important to me. I have it here in my office.
Oh.
And I have it in glass here. This is the copy that I read. It's held together by rubber bands. It's the original printing of the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Wow.
And I started reading that book, and I was very inspired by his life. And through self-reflection, through comparing myself to his life, which obviously very different circumstances, African-American, and in one of the worst times in history to be an African-American. That wasn't my life. I was a white male in later decades. But But I was able to notice a lot of patterns. The lessons are the same, and I realized that I was being a victim. I wasn't living an empowered life. I wasn't being self-responsible, and his life was very impactful on me. I studied his life for years. I've read dozens of books on Malcolm's life, and um, so through that inspiration and through those teachings that I was able to distill from Malcolm's life, I'll make it sound easy, but I quit drinking, I quit drugs, I quit alcohol. This was all very challenging. It took some time. I fell down a couple of times, got back up. I got myself back in school. I started working multiple jobs. And in that process, I didn't know anything about nutrition, but there was a music scene, the New York City hardcore scene in New York, where a lot of people were getting into like Hare Krishna stuff and veganism. And so I had friends that were into this because I was sort of a part of that music scene. A lot of straight edge kids were in there too. And straight edges was this youth movement. I don't know if it still exists, where they basically rebelled against the idea of experimenting with drugs and alcohol. And veganism became a part of that, not causing any harm to other animals and being living more compassionately. And then somehow the Hare Krishna stuff worked its way into that movement as well. But so I had friends that had talked to me about veganism, and I knew where the local health food store was. And I said, you know what? Soy milk doesn't have cholesterol. Cholesterol's bad. I'm 60 pounds overweight. I need to go to the health food store and buy soy milk. That was my thinking. That's all I knew. I don't necessarily recommend processed soy milk to my clients these days, but that was it in 1990, whatever it was, 94, 95. And when I walked into this health food store to buy soy milk, I started looking at the books, and I saw a book called Diet for a New America that's probably up here somewhere on my shelf. And I was like, this is going to be the book my first book on nutrition. I was reading stuff in like Men's Health magazine and things like that's kind of all I had access to. And then I said, I'm going to pick this book up. I'm going to study this book. And that book was written by a man named John Robbins, who was the heir to the Baskin Robbins ice cream company. And he rejected it all because he understood the relationship between diet and disease and pesticide residues in food, and more importantly, the treatment of animals in the factory farms, which is a little more widely known now because of films like Earthlings and all of the things that we see now on social. But was harder to come by that knowledge and information unless you were part of an animal rights organization or something like that. So my mind was blown. I was 19 years old. I had never considered these things. And within like 48 hours, I was vegan, and it was a quick turnaround. And I detoxed hard, and I detoxed really hard because of my toxic history. So through that process, I went on to meet a series of other teachers, Dr. Fred Bishey, who we can talk about, Gil Jacobs, who's a colon hydrotherapist. And it was a very intense experience and a very powerful one, not only on me physically. I mean, I lost 60 pounds in about 3 to 4 months. I had fevers, body aches, headaches, pimples, rapid weight loss. So I kind of experienced all of that. So physically, yes, but also spiritually and emotionally too. Like my entire mind opened up. I became such a more compassionate and thoughtful human. And a lot of that happened because of what I was letting go from my life, physically and emotionally, and what I was now bringing in, which was life. I was bringing in organic food that had life to it. I wasn't eating dead refined carbohydrates and dead animal fat. My body wasn't a graveyard and a junkyard anymore. So when and you see this in a lot of spiritual texts, when you start to clean the vessel, all of a sudden it's the best time to pray. That's why people fast and pray done together in all the different spiritual traditions. Cleansing the physical body opens us up to God energy, and I definitely experienced that. And that's the most definition I have for what that is, but I experienced it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Cool, man.
I know that was an earful, but that's the short version of how it all came together.
Yeah, no, I love that. Let's get the audience in on that one. Yeah, that was so nice. And also, I relate to so many things that you talked about. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And so, I think it's amazing how so many similarities there are of people's experiences that go through things like this, and really just the thing that I get kind of fascinated by is like the spiritual awakening that people have when they start eating this way and cleansing out their body and that sort of thing. It's one of the things I think could really help shift the world from the direction it's going right now and into something much better in the future. So hopefully more people can watch this interview and get an idea of how to do that. So pretty cool stuff.
Well, when we're choosing to eat plants, we're suddenly making choices toward, because it's all choice based. I mean, obviously, we never judge anybody indigenous people living in the jungle or something if they're not
Right.
vegan, right? Because they're
Yeah.
living in complete balance with their environment. So that's not it. But
Yep.
once we're living in an agrarian culture, and we're now, like we're living in our suburbs and our cities and we're doing all of our stuff, we suddenly have choice to make compassionate choices. And when we start doing that, suddenly we're putting that energy out there and we're going to start getting that energy back. Like it's a really,
Hmm.
it's a spiritual practice in a way. Uh, Not to go off on a tangent, but I was doing personal development work many years ago, and I was listening to people doing process work with people. I was in Los Angeles, and we were in this hotel near the airport. Not a very fancy place, but I'm doing this really deep work with people. And there's all these kind of like standard American, toxic, overweight, bags under the eyes, coffee drinking, people, but they're all at the personal development seminar wanting to do better for themselves. And, I'm already I'm decades into my food thing and my veganism and my organic stuff and natural living. But the rest of the group was not. That's not what this was about. And we're doing this process work, and people are talking about how they want to show up to be more love. They want to emanate love in the world, and they want to do all these things. And then lunchtime came, and I got my little Tupperware with my whatever I was eating, and they were all, just sort of funneling out of the event center, and they're walking across the street. All these people, I just did this beautiful process work, tears in the eyes, all the deep connecting and emotion, and they're all going to the Wendy's and the McDonald's and all the places because that's what was there. And I was thinking, wow, like that's the antithesis of everything they said they wanted to be in the world. That's like, disrespect and suffering for animals. That's trash and pollution. That's polluting the body and causing disease. And I was like, wow, I was like, eating is in many ways really our dance with life, meaning like I would say the majority of people eat more than they do affirmations, more than they pray, more than they go to church or the temple or whatever their spiritual thing is. So that's really how we're showing up in the world. I mean, of course it's more than that. It's how we treat each other and all these other things. But when we think about just on a personal level, what are my actions every day? Where does my money, energy go? Does it go to organic farmers? Does it go to plants, or does it go to killing animals and injecting them with things and spraying pesticides that kill every single being on the planet? So, so when we start changing our behaviors, like, yes, our spiritual vibe is going to change tremendously.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. That's also, I love the way you explain things. So that's so it clarifies it in a way that I think a lot of people don't think about is, how the comparison of how often people eat versus how often they pray and do these other things that they're, trying to elevate to get to be, a better person. But yeah, eating is definitely one of the biggest things that you can change if you really want to make the widest impact. Because as you said, pesticides and the pollution and the harm to other beings and all these things. So yeah, really, really good points.
Yeah, it was an interesting observation that day. I was like, oh, wow, this might be one of the greatest learnings I take from this seminar. Yeah.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, okay. Let's get into the topic discussion, and that is for people that are looking to elevate themselves, get to a better place of health or a better place of spirituality, or whatever it is, why they're wanting to do a cleanse or a detox. What would be one of the first things that you would suggest that they consider? Like, what's something that whether they should do or shouldn't do, or what they should consider or not consider when thinking about starting one of these processes?
One of the things that, one of the important things is mindset, right? So, um, I've worked with clients. I've worked with tens of thousands of clients now. I've been a practitioner for 23 years. What a lot of people fail to recognize is their own addictions to food. And
Mm,
sometimes things make sense when we see it in an Instagram video or a book, and people say, I want to do that. And it's something very ultra pure, but they don't recognize the transition process that's going to be really important for them to be successful. So like my whole thing was I was never at a war with my body. I was never at a war with my food choices. I always got really honest with where I was, and I let it be this enthusiastic, exciting process. Like I still remember the first time I bought miso, and I was like, what is this? That was not a normal food for me where I grew up, and I was like making things with it. And I was really just enjoying the process of experimenting with all these new foods. And for a lot of people, cleansing, because we, especially the older we are, but because we have a lot of the processed foods and a lot of the foods that we grew up on, those addictions started before we were even born in the womb, because we share the same chemistry as our parents. So in a sense, we're born addicts. And that might sound a little bit extreme to people, but I say, okay, well, then go on a water fast just for the day, or just skip breakfast. And the average American's like got a headache and a white tongue and bad breath, and then, oh, my blood sugar, and I got, like, just like you see that immediately they go into a state of detoxification and withdrawal when they don't have what they want.
Yeah.
So to get honest with that and go, how am I going to set this up where, yes, I'm going to set up like a quote unquote cleanse for myself, but I'm going to have a lot of fun doing this and feel satisfied, so it's sustainable. That's like one of the most important things. I've watched so many people crash and burn, and particularly when people get into juice fasting or water fasting or raw food diets, it tends to attract a high percentage of people with extreme behaviors. So it kind of makes sense. There's a lot of yo-yoing, or I call it stock graph dieting. It's like up and down, up and down. It's like super elevated. I'm on watermelons this week, but oh no, now I can't handle it. So I'm back to eating like, pizza or fries or whatever,
Yep.
things like that. So that's not good for the body. It's not good for the chemistry. It's not sustainable. So I always encourage people, I go, let's find out who you are and what you can have fun with. Like what could you really have fun? What could be really exciting for you to like a thing to set up? Nothing that has the intention of deprivation in it. Once we get the deprivation stuff, that comes later when someone is totally disciplined. Over time, as we get into the cleansing arts and the body's really open, the channels of elimination are open, that toxic load is released. The craving for food changes, your microbiome changes, it gets a lot easier to do things like fasting and stuff like that. So someone needs to really, consider their toxic load and realize that we're addicted to a lot of the things that have made us feel good traditionally, whether it means the foods that mom used to make growing up, the processed stuff that we have, or if we're still smoking or dabbling with drinking or whatever, like that's going to call us a little bit. So we have to do an ease of transition. So we're not sitting there having to do this whole discipline thing, making cleansing this hard, arduous task.
Yeah. Perfectly said. Great point. Yeah, I as well have seen so many people that they jump into these things not really having a full understanding of what it takes to make this something that's going to be a long-term success, rather than just a short-term, like you said, like watermelons for a week and then back to McDonald's or whatever. So yeah,
and people do it. They do it a lot.
Yeah. They do. Yeah, I've seen it more than I like to admit. And I'll, that is a great segue into the first one of the first things that I had written down as well is establishing a healthy lifestyle outside of the fasting or outside of the cleansing period. So very similar to what you were just saying, but yeah, I mean, I promote, and this is just a general, guideline for people in 21 Day Raw Transformation Program. I promote the SFS, daily meal design. So that's kind of what I give people as just a general starting point. And that just stands for smoothie. So SFS, smoothie, fruit, salad. And if you can use that as just like your base, as where you start, and it's going to be, everybody's going to have to tweak that to what works best for them and their situation, but that's where I try and start people, is getting them getting something hydrating in a smoothie, or it can just be fruit as well, or whatever, it can get some hydration into the body early in the day to really flush the gut, give the brain some hydration, let that thought process, click in, so you're making good decisions throughout the day. But yeah, having an understanding of how to live outside of the cleansing periods is, it's the only way that you can make this, get the success that you're looking for long term. Otherwise, yeah, if you keep bouncing back and forth, it's just, it's a losing game.
Yeah, cleansing is not an event. It's a continuum that needs to be maintained. It doesn't happen, in a month and then you're all done for the year.
Yeah.
Our chemistry is constantly reacting to what we're doing and what we're putting in.
Yeah, 100%. And I've also said like my lifestyle is like a detoxification lifestyle. Basically everything that I do is aimed at reducing my toxic load, as you mentioned, and really just keeping keeping the what I'm taking in as little in pollutants as possible, as well as everything else outside of food. The people I hang out with, the media that I listen to, the air that I breathe, all this stuff, the water I drink. So, yeah, the toxic load, as you mentioned, is also something that should be, I think, top of mind for people that are thinking about doing this, because it goes well beyond the cleansing period and just kind of optimizing your environment for supporting the endeavor of trying to let the body heal and kind of remove a lot of those obstructions that you're likely have been exposed to.
Yeah, I mean, that brings me to another one of my points I was going to make today was that people really need to consider their toxic load and what their detoxification experience is going to be. So my teacher in the colonic world, Gil Jacobs, has a saying: "Don't develop a short-term memory in the colonic business." I mean, and for us, especially where I started out, we're working with a lot of people that lived their whole lives in New York. Maybe they smoked, they did party drugs, they were, did the college life. Everyone in our culture is not, in alignment with proper food for a human being. So people have a lot of obstructions and a huge toxic load. And then they read a book where David Wolf, when he used to be super active, he'd be touring through and he'd come through and he'd talk about a raw food diet and everyone would be like, boom, mind blown. Everything changes tomorrow. And then they'd change it and they would drop into the deepest, heaviest detox that was actually working against them.
Right.
So, really understanding that, we're an accumulation of not only everything we've done in our life, but we actually accumulate toxicity from our parents' tissue quality. And I go over this in Eliminating the Toxic Load, one of our master classes at the Academy, where the environmental working group, I'm going to fudge up the numbers because I don't remember them exactly right now, but the environmental working group did a study called 10 Americans. And in that study, they took 10 Americans and they tested them for 400 and something toxic, carcinogenic, endocrine disrupting chemicals. And they found that they tested positive for 200 or 300 of them. And they knew that it wasn't the water they were drinking. They knew that it wasn't the food they were eating. They knew it wasn't the air that they were breathing. And I was like listening to this study at first, this video, this presentation. And I was like, what did they put these people in a bubble? How do they know this? How do they know they don't have it? And the reason that they knew it wasn't the things that they were doing, it wasn't the products they were using, was because none of them had been born yet. So they were all still in the womb testing positive. And one of the crazy things is that I think there was 60 something plus chemicals that they tested positive for that had been banned from use for over 30 years and were still persisting in their parents and now in them. So it had been banned for 30 years in your parents. Now it's in you. And then of course we know, look, we come into the world. Many of us are not breastfed or we know what eating like the little goldfish are and colorful candies and Lucky Charms and the processed homogenized, like pesticide laden antibiotic residue milk. And we know all the stuff that we've had in our life and we know what we've partied and we know what we've done. That's the quality of our tissue, and that toxicity to varying degrees remains in the body. And the body's always trying to get it out. Always. It's always trying to purge it out. That's why the average American skips breakfast and they feel like their blood sugar is off, they're headachy, they're cranky, they can't get their head together until they have a cup of coffee, right? Because that's the longest amount of time overnight that they fasted. So suddenly, they fast and all of a sudden they wake up gross, big goopy eyes, white tongue, bad breath, morning breath, and it's like, well, this stuff is just bubbling out of you. So the moment we go into a cleaner diet, that's going to happen. And the faster we go the more assistance that we're going to need. And that's sort of how I got into the colonic work. I was studying one of my teachers, Dr. Fred Bishey. He's 96 years old now. He still practices. He still sees people. He still runs. He's a phenomenal human, a highly spiritual human. He told me that his goal in life was to be a blessing to everyone he comes in contact with. But I was trying to be like him, and I wanted to study nutritional science, and I was studying it. And then I met Gil Jacobs, the colonic therapist, and he was talking to me, and he said, I know that you are studying nutrition. He said, and I'm going to be honest with you, 20% of it is all the minutia of the enzymes and the antioxidants and the phytochemicals and all these little factoids that you're studying. He goes, that's like 20% of it. That stuff's important. But he says 80% of it is shitting, sweating, and pissing. He goes, you get somebody shitting, sweating, and pissing, and he goes, you're 80% there already for that person. He goes, all that needs to be in place before the wild blueberries and whatever the enzyme thing comes in. He goes, you need those channels of elimination open. And in the waiting room, I watched person after person with either advanced disease or that was in a highly toxic body transform themselves, doing the work, using the food in the diet transition, and then doing the colonics. And I was like, this is it. This is how you really affect someone. So that's what inspired me to do the work. But but to get back on point, what I think one of the things people really need to consider is where they're starting out. I think that a lot of the times we think our bodies are perfect, and then something comes in and messes us up, when in reality, we are this entire sort of synchronistic exchange of chemistry going on at all times that we are solely responsible for, whether it be our thoughts or the physical foods or substances we're putting in our body. And when we get into a place where we simplify and we let the body clean house, a lot of stuff's going to surface. And I think a lot of people forget that.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the things that I've also seen in the much shorter time that I've been doing this than you have. But yeah, it's understanding where you're coming from is so important. And I also love Dr. Bishi. He's an incredible man, and I think he has accomplished his goal of being a blessing to everyone he meets. I don't imagine that could be possible that he hasn't been for anybody. And I love what Gil said about eating, shitting, and pissing is the big part, which leads me into one of the points that I had written down as well. Is really, instead of focusing on a specific thing in terms of like a parasite cleanse or a liver cleanse, some whatever it is, and I appreciate the importance of, or the benefits that you can receive from those things, but if you can just in general just take a step back and really just focus on the eliminative pathways and supporting your body's eliminative pathways, because even if you take some like a heavy metal cleanse or something else and your eliminative pathways are clogged and they're all gunked up, you're probably not gonna receive the benefits that you're expecting, because it's just gonna get moved around and have a hard time getting out of the body anyways. So if you can look at the colon, the skin, the kidneys, the lungs, that's going to help you, making sure that you're optimizing the condition of those pathways, the areas of the body that allow these toxins to be excreted, is going to be, I think, a greater benefit to at least start with. That's like the foundation for me, is like, look at your eliminative pathways, work on optimizing their condition, and then, you can look at more specific things. But if the eliminative pathways are open, that's going to make anything that you do in addition to that much more effective. And so that would be something that I would say is key if you're thinking about getting into this type of thing.
Yeah, there's a place for all of those things, liver flushes, like these focused cleanses, but it's advanced work. And when I say advanced work, I don't mean like, oh, eat clean for 2 weeks and then try one of them. I mean, eat clean for a couple of years, consistently before you even think about doing things like that. Um, there's a place for like every once in a while, someone will do a juice fast out of the blue that probably shouldn't be doing a juice fast, but they change from the experience of that. But more times than not, they crash, they burn, they go back to their previous lifestyle when they really need to get into the mastery of clean eating over a course of years before they even consider doing something like that. Every once in a while, it has a really good positive effect on people, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And honestly, I'm kind of one of those people where I just kind of jumped into a 10-day juice fast, like, you know, pretty much out of the blue. But I will say though, before that, actually probably years before that, I was already incorporating large salads into my diet. So I think that was a big part of what made my transition much smoother than a lot of other people have experienced. When I got into that juice fast, I had some fatigue, some headaches, but for the most part, it was pretty pretty smooth. And from there on, like it was like a light bulb went off, and I felt like a whole new person in so many different ways. And it just led me, further and further down this path. And so, yeah, you're right. It can be beneficial, to just jump into something like that. But yeah, for the majority of the people, there's probably a better chance of long-term success focusing on, like you said, like do a couple years or, at least several months of, healthy whole food eating, and get the ultra processed food out, and the drugs or whatever it is, and try and let your body come back to a pretty stable condition, before you start throwing some of these things at it.
Yeah, and it's different for everyone. I mean, look, if someone's, they're starting out, they're 22 years old, they grew up in Hawaii, their parents were hippies and they never had white flour in the house. And they, there's that. And then there's growing up on processed food and alcohol and smoking cigarettes from the age of 12. So, and starting when you're 45, 50 years old, right? So there's all this gray area of like, what's going to be most valuable for who. But yeah, your point exactly though.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess just to kind of reinforce that whole idea is, there are people that I've talked to that basically went from McDonald's and fast food to a whole, like, basically raw vegan the next day, and yeah, they have they've made it work. So yeah, just a reinforcement of that. But yeah.
So, talking about doing the advanced work kind of brings me to my other point I was going to make about, at a certain point, our body believes everything we tell it it's going to do. Now, experimenting, doing a 10-day juice fast or doing a raw food diet for a couple of weeks or whatever, like that's fine. Like we could play around and then go back and forth a little bit. But I've experienced people that will do long juice fasts, or they'll do raw food diets for long periods of time, like year plus or whatever. And then they have a change of mind and they go, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to backtrack now. And they start either incorporating way too much cooked food. They might go back to animal food. They suddenly have a complete change of heart. And if they've done it properly and long enough, the backtracking becomes highly destructive to them. So it's almost like, when I was young, when I first started smoking cigarettes, I would cough up gross stuff, some like green and orange and blood streaked things. And I would have all this sinus stuff. I would get these massive headaches. And then it all went away one day because your body's constantly accommodating what you do. Right. That happens with food. We see it with the kids with the tonsillitis and the ear infections and the clogged sinuses. And then one day suddenly they're just like teenagers and they're 20 something and like they're still eating all the junk that they did growing up, but their body sort of like resigns to the fact that it has to deal with this and accommodate this. And then, on the other side of that, our body's constantly trying to purge that stuff out if we give it the opportunity, but it acclimates to what we do. So when we're going in that other direction, and we're telling the body it's going to not have to put massive amounts of digestion into food. It's telling the body that it's not going to have to manage all sorts of wastes and clogging foods anymore. It's telling the body that that it's going to eliminate really well because we're hydrated and we're pooping all the time. And particularly if we're fasting, it's telling the body we're not even gonna have to do any work, but all this energy is going to be liberated and we're just basically going to live on light and hydration and juice and minerals. When we come out of it, we need to live a life that's going to uphold that communication we gave the body. I know someone that did a lot of long juice fasting and did a lot of raw food dieting for a while, and spent time, was living in Florida, running on the beach, working at Hippocrates Health Institute, like they were in the life. And then they kind of had like fuck it moment, and they went back to the food choices, the vegan burgers, the bagels, the pasta, all these things that actually healed them 20 years earlier, because they went from standard American to a vegan diet that was very grain and bean heavy and all that stuff, and some fake meat or whatever, and that was actually good for their transition. 20 years ago they lost weight, they did better, but then as time went on they got into this more pure way of living. But now they backtracked, and it has been almost a decade for this person of dark black circles under the eyes, massive excess weight on the body, all sorts of crazy food roller coaster stuff. Like and the person's not even eating a diet that's that toxic. It's a diet that would be cleansing for my dad if my dad went on it, but because they're going back, their body believed and adapted to the fact that they were going to be living on this much higher level, much more efficient level. And then they went back and started putting in foods that were clogging and toxic again. And it hit them like a ton of bricks. Excess weight, the black circles, the exhaustion, the constant chasing of what's wrong with me. Is it adrenal fatigue? Is it this? And it's like, it's what you're eating, bro.
Yeah.
So the body believes what we say. So when we want to do an extreme behavior and go, I'm all in, I love cleansing, I want to go deep on this thing, just go like, okay, I need to be mentally prepared to like really live this way if I'm going to do this consistently and deeply. Otherwise, it's a good idea to go, I want the value of a cleansing life, but I'm going to do a nice transition. I'm going to backtrack. I'm not going to go too hard in one place. I'm not going to go on an all raw diet for like 2 years and then suddenly change my mind. Like, that you're in now. Like, this is your new way of living. Otherwise it can actually become quite destructive, and we can sort of make a mistake doing that. And people make mistakes doing this, breaking fasts as well. So transition in and transition out is a really important thing for people to consider.
Yeah, 100%. I like the idea of, I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but they talked about how, it's much better to be at like, 80% or 90% or whatever consistently than 100% and then 20%, 100%, so yeah.
That's it right there.
Right.
It's one of the reasons I'm not an advocate of raising raw children. A lot of people are like, Mike, your children aren't like all this pure. Like my kids, compared to the standard American, they pretty pure. It's like all organic, lots of raw food, juice, they do the whole thing, whole grain, whatever. Mostly plant-based, although we have rescued chickens, so my kids will eat the eggs and stuff. But people are like, wait, your kids aren't vegan, they don't do this and that. And I'm like, look, this kid doesn't have a choice. They're going to do whatever we do. And then if their tissue quality is too clean and they either need medical intervention one day, or they just get to an age and they're like, my buddy's drinking beers and smoking cigarettes and I haven't lived yet, I need to make a mess, that can be so destructive on the chemistry of someone that's too clean. So, you want to like for me, I'm a big advocate of like, raise your kids clean, but give them enough room to live in the world. They need a buffer. They need a toxic buffer to make their own decisions. And then if they want to be like me when they get older, then they can be like me and they can do the deeper practices that I do, and they can live the way that I do and do the fasting that I do and all that stuff. But, until then, I'm not an advocate of that, because you're making a choice for someone. You're putting them in a box they can't get out of without repercussions.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So true. So true. I guess, let's see. I mean, that really, it's a good segue into, my next point. And it's, kind of just reinforcing again what you said already. But taking emotional and mental cleansing as seriously as you do physical cleansing, because I think people neglect the emotional cleansing, and if they don't go into a detox or a cleanse or even just a lifestyle like this, Without a balanced, healthy mindset, then that I think is what leads to a lot of this yo-yoing and back and forth type behavior, and falling off, and just doing a complete 180 like you said. So understanding what it takes to elevate your emotional health, and getting rid of a lot of the exposure that you have to unnecessary stressors, and also surrounding yourself. I say this all the time, but surrounding yourself with healthy influences, supportive people, supportive messaging online, things like that play into the mindset you take into, which we also inherit a lot of as well, as mindset and mental state of being, because again, who we spend time around. And as children, obviously we're exposed to our parents, probably the most for most people, and so you're going to take on a lot of those traits, those thinking patterns, those ways of speaking. And so just because you, even if you grew up though with parents that might not have been as positive or health focused, the awareness that you had programming from that situation, having that awareness and being able to make a conscious decision to change, is where I think the power is at, is that awareness, and knowing that you have the capability to make different decisions if that's what you want to do. So yeah, just detoxing your mind, and placing importance on that whole area of the process, and going into whatever type of cleansing or healing that you're trying to do with as balanced and healthy state of mind as you can, so that you can hopefully avoid a lot of the yo-yoing and back and forth type stuff.
Yeah, as Dr. Bishy says, the thoughts we entertain really dictate what our life is. Or as Tony Robbins says, the story we tell ourselves is the reflection of what our life is going to be, and the meaning we give it. Yeah. I had a client once, saw her whole family for many years, and she had some physical problems, and they sort of had an emotional history where the whole family did, where the father passed away when the kids were younger, and so she had all these problems, and the whole family used to come in and they used to get treatments with me, and there was definitely a very negative and there's definitely a very negative mindset going on with this one woman. And she was doing all the right things, reading all the right books, getting the colonics, doing the juicing, eating the food the way it was supposed to be eaten, doing the food combined, doing all the physical things. And it was sort of a head scratcher. Why is she still suffering? But I think we all kind of knew why she was still suffering, because she was very connected to the association of these symptoms and what they meant for her. It was probably almost a safe place for her to be this, because it meant she didn't have to show up in other places of life, perhaps. But she, by chance, this is in New York City, and she by chance was in an elevator one day. I don't remember what she was doing or where she was going, and she bumped into Gary Null. Do you know who Gary Null is?
I do.
Yeah, Gary Null. I don't know if he's still relevant in things today, but he was a big deal, big time radio, health. He was kind of like the Dr. Mercola of his time, just deeply immersed, almost fanatical when it came to supplements and this and that. And he's had his own health food store and his own supplement line. And he was that guy.
Yeah.
And so she bumped into him, and she came to me and she said, I bumped into Gary Null. And I said, oh, that's cool. I was like, what did you talk to him? She goes, yeah, I told him all my problems. I was like, in the elevator, you told him all my problems? Of course you did. And she's like, yeah, I told him all my problems. And he said, I really want to help you. And he goes, come upstairs to my office right now. And he took her upstairs to the office, and she's like, Mike, all this guy did, I don't know what he thought, but he put me in a room and he played this video for my mother and me. And it was all about positive thinking and mental and mindset. And I was thinking, I know exactly what he was doing. He saw it immediately in you. He saw that your mindset was the thing that was your worst enemy, that wasn't serving you. I was like, that was happening. And I'll tell you, with my whole lifestyle, all the things that I do, I can get in a very negative mindset, especially around like financial trauma and stress and owning businesses and things. And lots of things go wrong, and I'm the one that needs to fix them all. And I've like wrecked my body just with thoughts,
Mm.
and if it wasn't for my lifestyle, I'd probably be in a much worse state. But like I've caused like massive inflammation in my body and headaches and things that had nothing to do with anything I was doing with lifestyle. I'm eating early, I'm eating clean, I'm stretching, I'm taking a hot shower before I go to bed, I'm doing breath work, I'm doing all. I shouldn't be having this amount of tension or headaches or things. But just that alone, we can generate so many stress chemicals in our body. We wreak havoc on our chemistry. So this is why a lot of people that do live a long time have a very they either have a spiritual practice or something that allows them to process the stresses of life and let it move through them and not accumulate in a toxic way, because we do accumulate toxic experiences in a physical way.
Yeah, you can, and I've seen this in people as well, as doing all the right things with the diet and the lifestyle, and having the mindset of a fear mindset, or just not being able to successfully process stressful emotion. I'm also somebody that's dealt with that as well a little bit. So it definitely, people wonder, I'm doing everything right, but why haven't I healed? It's been years. Why haven't I healed? And it goes back to, and sometimes it can go really deep. Things that people don't even recognize, things they forgot about consciously, but subconsciously they're still holding on to it. So looking back at a lot of the, the things that gave us trauma, and or just finding a way to release some of that tension and some of those maybe negative thought patterns that we fall into, can really be a game changer for, even people that are living and eating as perfectly as they, do. So, yeah.
We see a lot of this in the work that I do on the treatment table, the actual physical work I do with people on the treatment table, where people are, we're talking, maybe it's like, maybe they've had a couple of sessions and we did some surface, like, hey, how are you? What's that? Where do you live? How old are your kids? Oh, so cute. Let me see a picture. Cool, whatever. And, this is the small talk that we do, like when we're doing the work. But then, they start getting a little more comfortable with us as therapists, and we're talking and we're doing the work, and they're having an okay treatment. And then suddenly it's like, I talk about, where they're living or something. And they go, yeah, well, I had to move in with my mom again. And this is someone in their 30s. And she's like, because, my child's father left suddenly, and I have this bad relationship with my mom. And then the tears start to flow, and then the tube goes black, and the deep releasing starts to happen. And it's always when like the ex-husband comes up, or the thing, or the parent, or the whatever it is, comes out. And suddenly the body really starts letting go of physical toxicity. So working on that emotional stuff. And we encourage and we create a space for, and we obviously go with the flow of it when that happens. But, we don't, that's not part of the work that we do. We're technically just doing very physical work where we're giving somebody a colonic, but that all comes hand in hand. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. You've probably had you have some pretty interesting and amazing stories over the last 22 plus years of helping people like that.
Yeah, I remember the first time I was like in my early 20s, and I was a new therapist. And this woman just started sobbing on the table, and I was like, oh, not ready for this.
Right.
I mean, I handled it well, but that was also 20 plus years ago. But
Sure.
but I was like, oh yeah, this is a part of the work that we do. Makes total sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't expecting it initially. I mean, I kind of knew that might happen, and most treatments are actually fun and light, and people are just vibing high, and, but it does happen where we go to a deep place sometimes in our conversation with the physical work, because we do, our nervous system runs right through the intestine. I mean, so we do have this emotional sort of seat of the body down in our abdomen. And, when we're letting things go that we might have been holding on to as a safety mechanism, and now that's not there anymore. And if we've done the work to prepare for a treatment, and someone's not really had any food that day, ate early the night before, put in a bunch of raw foods before that, And now we're creating this emptiness at the core. Like we're open emotionally, and things flow.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've had probably 10 colonics in my life, and yeah, they've all I've actually made some great relationships with different colon hydrotherapists that I've gone to. It seems everybody that does this work is so like full of wisdom and just I'm always inspired every time I go to a colon hydrotherapist. So it's fun. And also, I actually I almost went to school and thought about starting my own colon hydrotherapy clinic, but I never ended up taking the leap like you did. So but I'm glad you did, and are you're helping people wake up to some of the amazing benefits of really getting the junk out of our intestinal tract and allowing things to flow a little smoother. So yeah,
It's good work. It's also an insane profession. It's
I
an
bet.
insane profession. The people
Yeah.
that we work with, sometimes I'm like, how on earth is this my job?
Yeah, I can imagine. Cool. So I don't even know what number we're on. Do you have? I've got maybe one more that I could throw out, but do you have any additional thoughts or suggestions for people on how to approach detox or cleansing?
Really just to say, do it very enthusiastically and have that, and do it intelligently. We're realizing that, it took us X amount of years, usually from day one for a lot of us, to accumulate the toxic load that we have. And that also translates over into the thought patterns we have and all of these things, right? A lot of this is, there is a part of it that, is our soul. It's innately us. But a lot of the things and experiences we have and things we put in our body are things that we've done and accumulated over this lifetime. And when we get into cleansing work, it's not always going to be a very quick transformation. So to really look at the different practices, think about transition, be enthusiastic about it, and look at the different practices that you have at your disposal. I didn't know about them in the beginning, so I just went through all the hard work. Now I was young, even though I had a very toxic history, I also happened to be, still technically a teenager when I started. So that was great. If you're 45 years old and you don't have the luxury of youth and time on your side now, and you're trying to cleanse, just realize your body's older, it's more toxic, your organs might be a little bit more compromised. Transition is really important, and also use the really easy and free things, almost in a lot of senses. Sweating, first hydration, sweating, cold immersion. And if you have access to colonics, you might want to think about getting some of them. And you don't have to fix what's not broken. If you start eating clean and you're shitting your brains out and everything's great and you're feeling good and weight comes off, like you're doing good. You're doing good. But when you start to hit bumps in the road, don't make a video after 6 months saying this is how a vegan diet almost killed me, right? Like that's what we see all the time. We see people that were either too addicted to foods and going, oh, vegan diet didn't work for me, because they never actually fully transitioned properly, or they over cleansed and detoxed way too hard. Particularly this happens with men and fit men that are young, when they start to lose muscle mass and maybe a little hair falls out because they're not eliminating, but they're eating all this fruit and clean food. And then they make the video. This is how a vegan diet almost killed me. This is how a vegan diet failed me. So do it enthusiastically, do it intelligently, and don't have a short-term memory in the cleansing world. Realize that there's a deep history that needs to be retraced and worked through.
Beautiful. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, great stuff. The one last thing that I'll just throw out there is also and again we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but really also looking at synthetic chemical exposure outside. Most people are just looking at the diet. I also like to encourage people to look at their exposure to synthetic chemicals in their environment, because the way that I like to explain it to people is, a fish, if you got a pond and you got a fish in there, and it's got the perfect food, it's swimming around, it's getting its exercise, it's in its little school, it's got its social connections, everything seems perfect. But if there's a factory next to that pond and it's dumping trash and pollution into that pond, even though the fish has all the right food, it has the exercise, has everything else that's perfect, if the pond is full of chemicals that are impacting its health, it's not going to experience the health that you would expect, or that it might expect with having so many good things going on in its life. So, we're in a pond of air, essentially. And so if you're breathing in air fresheners, perfumes, colognes, you're putting on synthetic chemicals in your deodorants, lotions, your clothing. A lot of people are wearing petroleum-based synthetic clothing that we talked about in the game show last week. If you're wearing polyester, that's actually has contraceptive properties, so it can actually mess with your fertility. So especially like women that are wearing those tight, polyester pants, whatever they're called, but even men, wearing polyester, underwear and things, that can definitely be having an impact. And so, there's a lot of different things that we have to consider today with how toxic everything is. Looking at our exposures in various areas of our life, even laundry detergents and what kind of sheets you're sleeping in. And if you can start with the things that, you're exposed to the most often, like the highest exposure. So your clothing would be one to start looking at, because most people are, either in clothing or in their bed sheets 24/7, their entire life. We're wearing clothing or we're in contact with, some sort of material that we're sleeping in or whatever. And so that is a constant exposure. If you're wearing these types of fabrics, or if you're washing them in synthetic, a lot of times estrogenic chemicals that are in a lot of these detergents. So, you want to look at these things. The water, I think, is also important to look at. So make sure you're getting a clean source of water. The food, obviously, try and eat organic if you can, or grow your own food, that sort of stuff. But yeah, just looking at the environmental exposure, even beyond diet, I think is a key thing that a lot of people overlook. And it even goes to toilet paper. People weren't using toilet paper with chemicals and formaldehyde and chlorine in them. So yeah, a lot of different areas that you can look at, but beyond diet, that can definitely make your detox experience much better, and also just your long-term health outlooks more positive.
Yeah, really good points, Matt. That's why we focus on the practices as well. It's like the sweating, the cold immersion, it directs these accumulated toxins that maybe aren't coming in with your food, because we're getting them from everything. It keeps those channels open and almost squeezes the body down like a sponge in a sense to move them out. And we have to actively do that, because a lot of these things, because they don't exist in nature, the detoxification pathways struggle with them and they bond into the tissue. That's why we see these chemicals that have been banned for 30 years in babies being born today, because they're locked into the tissue. Otherwise, the normal detoxification pathways of their parents over the past 30 years would have let these things go, but they're not even able to do that. So we have to actively do cleansing work.
Yeah, 100%. Love it. All right. Well, this has been incredible. Thank you so much, Mike. Truly, I really appreciate the wisdom that you're sharing with everybody on a daily basis, and what you share with us today has been awesome. Can you share one last time, before we get into the Q&A, where people can find you if they want to follow you or take advantage of your services?
Yeah, one of the places I do the most work, like social media work, is on Instagram. So it's EveryDay Detox on Instagram. I'm also on YouTube, and I do, although I've sort of scaled back a little bit, I do have a podcast, and I do I put some content up on YouTube. Same thing, EveryDay Detox, a little bit on TikTok, but we'll see if that's still around in 6 months. And the place they can really find more about this work online is everydaydetoxacademy.com. That's the place. And then there's my studio in Ashland, Oregon, but unless you're local, you're probably not coming over to see me. So
Right.
It's a small town. It's not, I'm not in New York City anymore. So,
Yeah,
Ashland is a much smaller town. So you pretty much need to be a local to be coming to see me.
sure. Amazing. Well, yeah, I've got the links to all that down in the description box down below. So definitely encourage everybody to go check all that out, including, I think I put your Linktree link in there. So that'll link them to everything else that you got, like your discounts and products that you recommend and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and the Vitality Broom Cleanse is something, it's just a little PDF that we really summarize everything in like just a few pages with tons of recipes that we give to new clients so that they understand what we're trying to do with the work and how to prepare for it. But that's not just to prepare for a colonic, that's to prepare you for every day. It sounds very similar to what you've created for people, Matt, with
SFS?
SFS thing. Yeah, it's very similar to something like that.
Nice.
So definitely, people can just download that. It's free. They can take a look at it and, use the recipes. But for the most part, the concepts we discuss in there are really key.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, yeah, again, everybody, the links are in the description box down below. So for sure, go check that out. All right, now let's head over. It's time for the Q&A session. So we're over in front of the blackboard now. So let's get your questions rolling in, guys. What do you got for us? You've got a cleansing and detox expert here, decades of experience. So take advantage. Throw them in the question or the chat box right now. Let's see. I don't know if I saw any come in earlier. I guess just to start us off while I'm looking through the chat here, is there any, I guess, what would you advise somebody who is considering a colonic? Is there anything they should do to prepare for an appointment like that, like ahead of time?
Yeah, it's interesting. So first of all, we have people come in that don't prepare anything and they have great treatments.
Nice.
But a lot of people also don't have great treatments or they don't maximize the value they can get because they do eat a crummy diet. One of the things that I just was discussing with one of my colleagues, another therapist, is that I'm actually going to add as a contraindication for colonics a carnivore diet because we're getting more and more carnivore people coming in and we still get the job done with them. But to be honest, I don't feel like dealing with all that disgusting shit when someone's not going to prepare for a treatment the way it's supposed to be prepared for. Yeah. So we have something, the Vitality Broom Cleanse is there's certain all-star ingredients that are really good at cleansing and sweeping our intestines. They just have the proper hydration, acid, and enzyme profile and fiber profile that really sort of break things up and sweep them up. And so the Vitality Broom Cleanse has a lot of these recipes that we created for people to do. But it's things like pineapples, apples, carrots, beets, celery, fennel. Like these are really great cleansing foods. Now, all plant food is fantastic, but like baby greens don't really sweep the intestine. They might have all these other benefits, but they're not really great intestinal cleansers. But so we just took the all-stars and we really created a menu that was focused on that. So for anywhere from 1 to 3 days, somebody can prepare and just integrate more of those in. Some people do the cleanse, specifically, like very specifically, they do it every detail of it, and that works as well too. But the treatments get way powerful when you prepare for them, like way powerful.
Wow. Yeah.
We consider the food, the ingredients are the soap, and the colonic is the shower. So like you got to lather up before you come in if you want a deep cleansing, a thorough cleansing.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. Where was it? Michael said, I have his red stuff and digestive stuff. I wonder if he's referring, is it the astaxanthin, the red stuff?
Astaxanthin.
Maybe?
That's in my link tree too, if people want to check it out.
Cool. And what is that again?
The astaxanthin is it's one of the very few products that actually ever stuck. Like I try all the things as they come up, all the different things, and very few of them actually stick. A lot of them are very theoretical in their value, where you go like, well, I read the sales page and it all makes sense and it seems like something my body could use, and then I spend a couple $100 on it and I take it and I go, I don't know. That's usually how most of the health supplements go. And by health supplements, I don't mean like things like a a nutritional supplement or like a green powder. Like those are foods that's different. But I mean, some of these more luxury supplements, things that could make us better potentially, but does it is the question. So I did a podcast with the developer of Elasta astaxanthin, Sam Shepard. People can go check it out on my YouTube page if they want, or they can click through the link and check it out there. But it is an algae that, as a defense to stress, and the stress for this algae could be the pH of the water's changing, the water's evaporating, the temperature's changing, there's too much sunlight. It produces this deep, rich red pigment. And that deep, rich red pigment is one of the most powerful antioxidants you can take in supplement form. When you do this, you neutralize so many free radicals in the body that you can reverse a lot of different disease states. And I talk about this with Sam in the podcast I did with him. But for someone that's not in a disease state, it's great because it can protect you from sun damage. It can protect you from damage of stress, the free radicals caused by stress, or any of the other different things that are coming through the body. So that's why I take it. It's great for the skin. It's great for disease prevention. It's not a cure-all, although for some people, if you listen to their testimonials, they say it is, and they had very profound experiences. But in general, I know it's not a cure-all, but it's a great tool in the toolbox, and I think people should use it. If you can, it's a luxury supplement. If you're not experiencing any illness, it's a luxury supplement, meaning like I didn't take it for the first 28 years of my time being into natural food, and I still did great. But now that I have it, I go, I'll add it in. And it's a little bit, spendy as well.
Sure. Cool. I've heard a lot of really, really great testimonies about it. I personally haven't tried it, but it sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's a great product. I highly recommend it. And I don't do that with most things. So
cool. Music Monster Man says he has a lot of incredible and informative interviews with Dr. Fred Bishi on YouTube. So there you go. Check out Mike's interviews with Dr. Fred.
Thank you. Yeah, I've done many with him. I've done a bunch of podcasts and things like that. He's been one of my greatest teachers, Dr. Bishi. He's it's just such a blessing. I happen to be from the same place he was. I live 10 minutes away from him.
Oh, wow.
It's just great.
How did you end up? What was the first time you met him?
I remembered when I was in high school, I didn't have it in me to pursue it, but I remembered a high school teacher went to see him and was like telling us, I saw this nutritionist and he was telling me how like flour is bleached and all these different, issues with food. I was really fascinated by it, but I was still like, 17 years old or whatever. And I was still like, okay, that's really interesting, but I'm going to go back to drinking and eating whatever I want. But I always remembered him. So when I first got into a vegan diet and I was dropping weight very quickly, and my mom was looking at me like, what are you doing? And I was detoxing so hard. I just remembered that there was this clinical nutritionist in Staten Island, somewhere near where I lived, that advocated a vegetarian vegan diet, and I should probably go see him. And then through a friend, I found out his dad saw him, and I got his number, and I went there, and I just went there as a client. And I talked to him and I was like, wow, this guy's fascinating. And he had this like cable access show called Eat Your Way to Health. And, it was exactly the way you would think a cable access show would look. And I would get up early on the weekends and I would watch it. And I really just became fascinated with his work because he was a brilliant mind that was educating people and guiding people so much against the grain of traditional nutrition of the food pyramid, and having to eat animals all day and having to eat cooked food all the time and having to eat, tons of starchy carbs all the time, and I was like, wow, I was like, this guy's pretty brilliant. And I would go to see him over the years. And then, I became a natural food chef. I worked at the local health food store and we became friends. And then, I started doing colon hydrotherapy work and we became colleagues, and I started working with him and we referred clients back and forth. And, that was 30 years ago. So, so he's brilliant. So aside from the spiritual conversations we have, but also the conversations around raw food and veganism and nutrition and all of these things, I really wanted to feature him as much as I could. That was my motivation to do a podcast. I used to listen to Joe Rogan 15 years ago. And I would like to be doing computer work, and I would just like, I'd be doing like the bookkeeping for my studios or whatever. And I would just put him on in the background. And I was like, I have conversations that people in our community would probably really get a lot of value out of that I have with Fred all the time. I was like, I should sit him down and I'll do a podcast too. And I started it 15 years ago, and that's why he's featured so much. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing, and it's like divine, synchronicity where you end up finding somebody like that that changes your life, and that's that's a perfect example of what I try and communicate to people as well. Is people, we talked about this, I think it was last week, where everybody wants to change the world, or everybody wants the world to change, but they feel like they can't do, they can't change the world by themselves, so they just don't do anything. But you look at people like Dr. Fred, who had a rough go early on. He had some issues, and then he turned his life around, became an incredible inspiration and a positive influence for so many people, including yourself. And now what you have done, now you've impacted hundreds of thousands of people that have watched your podcasts and been clients of yours, and so and who knows what the ripple effect from that will be. So that is how we change the world. And just Dr. Fred is one example of being somebody that decided he was going to change his way of living, change the way he was eating, and all this stuff, and take responsibility for his life and for his actions. And all the different people that he's impacted, and now the people that are impacting others beyond that. So so yeah, I just think I'm just always so in awe of the potential that we all have to to change so many different lives. And just from somebody watching this interview could change everything, and go on to change millions of other lives. So yeah.
Yeah, all from living truth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, embracing the truth is definitely it's not always easy, but it has some great benefits. Sherry says, how do we know when or how many colon cleanses to do for noobs?
It's always based off the last treatment. So I give people I'll give you the example. I have people I see in New York that I call them vanity colonics. Okay, so they come in, they have the disposable income. It's traditionally someone with a yoga mat over their shoulder and a green juice in their hand. That just came from another self-care appointment, and they come like twice a week for life because they like flat bellies and clear skin. So there's that crowd. And then there's the crowd of people that are looking to reverse some advanced disease, and they're using the treatments too. So they come quite often. However, what I try to do for everybody else is I want people to feel into it. So based off of your last treatment, if somebody had this epic treatment where it was an exorcism and so much left, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know I had so much in me. It's like, yeah, we should probably think about when the next one's coming in. If someone had just a great treatment and they're in really good shape, and I'm going, I'm seeing you're in really good shape. You were feeling good coming in. You're feeling great leaving, but feel into it. When you feel like things are not right, whether if you're eating cleaner and you're getting some detox symptoms, or maybe you're normally eating clean and you just didn't eat as clean and you made a little bit of a mess in there, then we fix it up. When things aren't right, then we fix it. When things aren't broken, we don't fix them. So I try to work with people to get them to really feel into what's happening. But also, we don't develop the short memory in the colonic business either. So if we go, hey, I saw the interview with you and Matt, and now I got Matt's book, and now I'm on a raw food diet, and I'm 45 years old, and I've never done anything like that. I want to come in for my first colonic. There's probably going to be a need to do more of them in the beginning, but still always based off the last treatment, because you might just be eliminating really well. And if you are just eliminating really well, then we don't have to fix what's not broken, but more likely than not, the treatments are going to be an asset to you as your body releases all the old endogenous waste from eating the new, cleaner diet. So, and sometimes, interestingly, we take people that go too fast and we have to backtrack them. I remember when I was a new therapist, and one of my colleagues, Tom DeVito, started putting one of his clients back on sausage and pepper heroes. And I was like, Tom, what are you doing? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. And he's like, he's doing juices and fruits in the morning, and he's doing too well to where the detox symptoms are overwhelming this guy. And he's coming in all sick and messed up. He's like, we got to slow the guy had a huge toxic history. Like, classic New Yorker, grew up on all street foods and alcohol and stuff. And we had to backtrack him a little bit. And he goes, now we've slowed it down. Now we can really get in there and start doing tweaks more slowly, so he's not overwhelmed with detox. So, we work with the transition, and the treatments are always in relationship to how much cleaner someone is elevating their lifestyle.
That makes sense. Valley says, is it good to have added substances into the colonic session? Some people add coffee, other things towards the end. What things do you recommend and what things should we avoid?
I don't recommend any of them during the colonic. Um, Coffee is a little bit different because a coffee enema, what happens is once you clear the intestine and you run coffee up into the intestine, it can stimulate a dumping of bile from the liver.
Hmm.
Okay. And that could be very beneficial for some people. It is a little bit questionable. I'll see people that say things like, oh, it wasn't until I did coffee enemas that I cleared my eczema, my lifelong eczema, or my whatever. And it's a little bit questionable as to whether or not it was just the bowel cleansing or if the coffee was really important. Because I've also seen people do diet transition and do colonics and clear their eczema too. And then I see people that do coffee enemas and do it, but nobody's really comparing the two. So I don't know if it was just the bowel cleansing or what that creates a lot of the results that coffee enemas get. But I do know that it does create a nice dumping of bile, and that could be very helpful if someone's looking to get an extra purge from the liver. So in that regard, coffee enemas could be good. But as far as like doing wheatgrass implants or doing a probiotic implant, which is unnecessary, by the way, but if somebody wanted to do some type of rectal implant, don't do it during a colonic. It just becomes a very expensive add-on. I've done all of them. I've done the wheatgrass. I've done the woman that used to send her driver to get 12 green juices and she wanted to run them through the colonic thing. And you know what it does? It goes down the tube, it goes through the body, it goes out the tube, and it goes down the drain into the sewer. And what you really want to do is get a colonic, let your body calm down a little bit. Like, your body's in a reactive state. We just exercised it. We got it moving things out. Let it be cool for a few hours. Go home that night. Go, get a little infant enema bulb or a syringe, get some fresh wheatgrass juice or chlorophyll or whatever you're going to do. Do the implant, lie on your left side on the bed, hang out a little bit, read a book, look at your phone, try to hang on to it as long as you can. Because more often than not, if someone does it too close to a colonic, what happens is the body's in a reactive state. They put a little something up the butt and then it comes right out in the toilet and they go, oh, I should have just flushed my money down the toilet because nothing really hung out and absorbed in my body and gave me benefit. So I like to keep those things separate and do them at separate times.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you for that. Let's see. Music Monster Man asks, how does he feel about a diet that is more structured, like raw till 4? So 1 meal of raw and 1 meal of cooked starch per day. Is that going to back someone up in the long run?
Well, it all depends on where we're starting, right? So, it's all about the improvement that we give to our diet and lifestyle. That's what gets us the results, right? So, I think I talked to you about, I mentioned earlier about my friend who was, he went on a really clean, fresh, hydrating raw diet and did a lot of juice fasting for a long time, and then went back to some of the more starchy stuff he did, and it didn't work for him. But in the early stages, it did. So that sounds like a super clean diet, but it all depends on where someone's starting. If someone's starting out with like standard American, whatever, and maybe, or even if they're eating like kind of standard vegan stuff where they might eat the fake mac and cheese or an Impossible Burger, and now they're doing raw till 4, it's great. It's great. But if someone's been on a raw diet for, 3 to 5 years, and then they go to raw till 4, that's not going to really work for them anymore because those starchy foods are going to just be, their body's not, it's going to have to reacclimate all of that. And it usually does that with a lot of protest, a lot of congestion and heaviness. And it's usually, it doesn't accept things like that really well. I'll give you an example. I kind of stopped doing it, but I have children, so I'll be making their food in the morning and I'll like make my son some oatmeal. And I'll be like, is this too sweet? And I don't eat grains or beans or any of these things. But really interesting. I'll take it, I'll touch it on my tongue, I'll just taste it, and then I'll spit into the sink. I immediately get a mucus reaction where like my nose, like I haven't eaten it. I've put it on my tongue and spit it out. And my body's already going like, whoa, what are you about to eat? What are you about to put in this body? It's already making a reaction. It's like, don't like this, don't want this. And it's creating mucus. But I used to eat oatmeal all the time when I first started, and I did not have that reaction because it was an improvement from my 40 ounces in McDonald's and pizza and cigarettes and Marlboros or whatever. So, we just got to find out where we want to be. And raw till 4 with like a starch-based diet with a salad, man, that is so clean and good. So if that's where you want to be, good, and you can stay there. If you want to move past that, you can move past that. Or if you don't even want to be that clean, you don't have to be that clean. You just want to make sure that, whatever the improvement is, you're just consistent with it.
Love it.
I hope
So
that made sense.
yeah, totally. Yeah. He's and then he followed up. He said, "Do you think grains are acceptable?" He said he's heard you say potatoes are all right, but he's not sure about grains.
Well, for some people, yeah. So when I first started, I was eating tons of, millet, quinoa, teff, amaranth, wild rice. So I was into all these new grains. In the 90s, when I started, grain and beans were the foundation of a vegan diet. Like that's just what it was in the 90s. And then, the raw food thing popped in the 2000s, and then you kind of learned more about living more on fruit and things like that. So, on a technical level, we can split hairs and talk about what a cleaner source of carbohydrates is. But if it's an improvement from what you've done and you're happy to be there, then it's great. Do whole grains. Whole grains could be nutritious. They can leave the body well, yeah, they could be really good. They could be a great transition food, or they could be a great lifetime food, depending on what you want to do. A lot of people aren't ready to give up grains, because
Right.
they either want pastries, or they either want a macro bowl, or they just, they're very warming and filling. And, so a lot of people like them for that reason. And they're not ready to give them up. So as long as you're choosing like organic whole grains and you're eating variety, like, yeah, it could be really good. Be a really good thing. I don't eat them personally because I've been doing this for 30 years and I've done a lot of cleansing work, and they cause, like I said, with the oats, I noticed they were causing a lot of mucus for me and stuff like that. They're technically not a real human food, meaning that early humans weren't running around and harvesting grains and eating them. Like there was no big grain fields and pots to throw them in. And like we developed all that. And it's an agrarian product. But it doesn't mean they can't be healthy. Like I said, you just want to eat them in their whole form. They could be great, but you got to check in with yourself. Does this make me mucusy? Does this make me feel heavy? Is this still serving me? Does it make me feel great? Maybe it makes you feel great. You just got to see where you're at with it and then just settle in there.
Yeah, definitely. Valley asks, is mucoid plaque a real thing that needs to be removed via detoxing or colon cleansing?
It is, but not the way that we think it is. Let me see. I might have all those books at my office. Let me peek up here to see if I can share a picture. Okay, so if we look at Dr. Hiromi Shinya's, do I have his book? I do. Dr. Okay, it's not going to fall down. Dr. Hiromi Shinya, he developed the colonoscope. He invented it. So he's the first person to ever remove a cancerous polyp from the intestine without splitting the abdomen open. Before he invented the colonoscope, the camera they used to look up the backside, and they also have little medical equipment on it where they pull parasites out. They have a snare where they will remove polyps, and they do all sorts of work in the intestine with this. Before he invented that, the only way to get a colonoscopy was to split your abdomen open. And I don't know if he's still alive. He was very old a number of years ago. He may have passed now, but he also wrote a bunch of books for the public. And one of them is The Enzyme Factor. This is one of the greatest books I've ever read. It's very simple and easy to read. He also wrote tons of medical texts. I have one right there. Diagnosis and treatment of what does that say? Diagnosis and treatment of, I can't read the words on that one, but it's basically a colonoscopy instruction manual. And so he wrote all the medical texts on it, but then he wrote these books for the public. And his YouTube, you'll see me talking about this on YouTube, showing his work, but his colonoscopy footage ended up on YouTube. And it shows what a compacted a caked up intestine looks like. And he shows the difference he shows the relationship between disease states and intestinal states. And he heals a lot of them with a specific diet. And it is very plant-based friendly, but, he wasn't of that mindset. So, there is some like fish and stuff like that, but he's into whole grains. He's into Kangen water. He's into eating like lots of fresh raw vegetables and fruits and stuff. And through his diet modifications, he helps cleanse the intestines as well. But the thing to understand when you look at these videos, when you look at this colonoscopy footage, is that's not actually what their intestine looks like, because they just took the biggest shits of their life. So that is them after taking different saline laxatives and blowing out as much as they can. Yeah. Now, what we're looking at when we look at the grossness of some of these colonoscopies, is we're looking at the stuff that is so sticky and impacted that it cannot come away from the intestinal wall, which is crazy that that's a condition living in them, because that's essentially all decomposing. It's a highly pathogenic environment that's creating all sorts of different wastes that are irritating the tissue. It's giving home to pathogens we never want growing inside of us, right? The microbiome is completely screwed in that environment. However, the stuff we see, the big ropes and stuff and the jelly things that we see on, that's not mucoid plaque. That's psyllium husk and bentonite clay that people are taking. And a lot of the time that will absorb stuff out of the corners and off the intestinal wall. And so there's a certain percentage of waste that it's pulling out of people, but the 90% of what you're looking at is not actual waste from the body. It's what that person put in there. So, and we do, with certain people, we do use psyllium husk and bentonite clay to really get that deeper absorption, move that stuff out of their tissue. But it's not for everyone. It can tend to get stuck in the body. But when we look at the colonoscopy footage, yes, the colon does accumulate waste. It accumulates it in pockets. It accumulates it as sludge against the walls, 100%. And that's something that we want to cleanse away. The best introduction to cleansing that away is the Vitality Broom Cleanse. It's using it's the hydration, the enzymes, the acids of those fruits and vegetables, and the fiber diversity that's in those ingredients that will help to clean it up on a regular basis. If you pair that with colonics, you're just going to expedite and increase the value of getting the treatment and moving that stuff out more quickly.
Awesome. Thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, and I've only seen that big long rope come out when I've been taking bentonite and psyllium husks. So yeah, I would have to agree with that.
It's a great cleanser, but it's just
yeah.
it's not what people think it is when they post pictures online. Yeah.
Right. Ryan asks, so are parasites and worms real?
They are 1000% real, but they are they're in much less people than we would be led to believe on social media. A lot of people have microscopic parasites. People just travel to different countries where the water, it might just be a natural part of their water system, or, they might have some very antiquated plumbing in some of the countries we go to sometimes for travel, right? So the hygiene might not be there. So people do like things like Giardia and stuff like that. These are common, but when it comes to like intestinal worms and stuff like this, like, sure, they exist. We know they exist in a lot of different third world places where the plumbing and hygiene is not up to standard, but they definitely also exist here, and they exist in, from people that work close with animals and things like that. But it's really rare. And a lot of this stuff, again, that we see on social media is we're actually looking at fecal mucus. When people start doing cleanses or getting colonics and then they pass these quote unquote worms, it's mostly fecal mucus that they're looking at. And it's not just parasites. Most people have microscopic parasites, although plenty of people can get them from handling animals and things like that. So I'm not a fan of doing cyclical parasite cleanses because a lot of those herbs are actually really irritating. That's why they think they're seeing worms, because a lot of the herbs create a mucus response in the colon. And when the body starts to absorb water out of the mucus, it gets stringy and long, very much like psyllium does,
Yeah.
So, there's a big misconception about what people are seeing, and a lot of people get misled in that way, and they get on these crazy parasite cleanses that they don't need to be doing. And people with real parasites, some of them in the natural health world make the mistake of like, all right, I got to get this done naturally. They don't know what they have. And they, for years, keep missing the cycle because they're running herbs through their bodies at doses that are like questionable. Like, is this the right dose? And then they're running these things through for too long, and they're getting symptoms because they're responding to all of these toxic herbs. And they're like, oh, I think these are the die-off symptoms. And there's always a story where they're explaining what's actually going on, but nobody actually knows what anybody has. The only people I've actually seen have success with real parasites is when they go to the doctor, they get tested, they find out which one they have, and they take antibiotics. And that's crazy for me to say, because I haven't really taken a drug in almost 30 years. I haven't taken an antibiotic for over 30 years. Don't recommend them. But I have to be honest, being a therapist and watching people run that cycle of craziness and always chasing and never knowing if they got rid of it or what it is, even when they get clarity on it, they take the antibiotic. If they treat themselves well to start, and then they come in and they continue their healthy lifestyle, it's almost like nothing happened, with the exception of the parasites gone, the bloating goes down, the abdomen gets calm, the colonics get better, and everything gets much better. And I had to admit that. I was like, God, I worked on this one. I remember this one client had pinworms, didn't know she had pinworms, and was being told by the teachers of mine and the therapists and everybody, not Dr. Bishy or any of those people, but some people I was working with. And she was being told, oh, you're cleansing, you got to do more colonics, got to do more colonics. And I was a new therapist. And they were like, Mike will do them at a discount because he's new. And I was doing them. I was seeing her twice a week for like a year, and constant digestive disruption, constant kind of, oh, I must be cleansing and all this stuff. And it wasn't that at all. She had pinworms. And when she went and got tested for pinworms, she came back like 2 weeks later, and she had the best colonics she ever had. And her abdomen was calm and everything was gone. She goes, I went to Dr. Kevin Cahill. He said I had pinworms, and he gave me an antibiotic, and I took it, and I'm done. And she was in better state, and she wasn't chasing that thing for another 12 months. And I was like, this is where medical science is probably pretty valuable when it comes to something like that, you know? Yeah. So that's a strange recommendation from me, but if someone has legit parasite concern, they should get tested at the very least. And if they want to pursue a natural one and use herbal, anti-parasitical herbs, then do it, but get tested. Don't just think something's off. I traveled, maybe I have a parasite, and then treat it, because you're just going to be wasting money and running all this stuff for your body that's going to be irritating.
Yeah. Great advice. Thank you. Music Masterman asks, are there any signs for identifying a legit colon hydrotherapist versus ones that don't really know what they're doing?
This is always a hard question, because there's definitely colonic snobs, and we all are them, meaning that we use our own methods for a reason. And right. I try not to talk poorly about other methods and things like that. I'm a gravity practitioner. I think if you could find a gravity colonic, I think that would be fantastic. A lot of it does come down to the skill of the practitioner. There's a lot of bad colonic therapists, just like there's bad tattoo artists. You know what I mean? There's people that have been doing it for decades and are fantastic. There's people that are just starting out. So the only way to know is to really just feel into it. Do you like the person? Do they seem like they're very attentive to your body? And are you getting good results? And, usually you should be able to see what's happening during the treatment. You'll be able to experience how you're feeling. Experience is really the only way to know. I'm just a big advocate of doing gravity colonics, and and it depends on where you are. My good friend Natalie is in Minnesota, where you are.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she's a great therapist. Yeah, she's been here to my studio and visited me here in Ashland, and she's a fantastic therapist. And her studio is called Move Colonics. But one of the things too is that the directories, colonic therapy directories, are not great for gravity therapists. So sometimes it's a little challenging to find one, but Google usually helps. But they don't have to be gravity. They just have to be attentive to their craft. Someone's going to be good at something if they really care about it.
Right. Awesome. I'm going to look up your friend. You said Madeline?
Natalie at Move Colonics. Yeah, she's a riot too. You love her. She's got the best sense of humor. She's one of the most awesome people I've ever met. So
cool. All right, I'm going to look her up for sure. Okay, great stuff. Crypto Consciousness asked, is there any truth to colonics or hydrotherapy destroying the healthy bacteria in the colon?
Zero. Absolute zero truth. I actually have studies right here on the desktop of one of my computers here that show the opposite of that. And that's just something somebody made up. Here's the things that people made up. They made up the idea that like doing a colonic is like washing out a cup at the sink. Like you're going to get everything out of it. There's a mucosal membrane there. Like think about what we do with our mouth. We drink water. That doesn't eliminate the bacteria from our mouth. We could even use Listerine, which it's an antibiotic for the mouth. Yeah. And that still doesn't kill all the bacteria on the mucosal membrane. And we still have bacteria in our mouth. So a little bit of fresh, clean water going up the backside is not going to eliminate anything. We're eliminating billions of bacteria every time we poop. Every time we poop, we're flushing beneficial probiotics down the toilet because it not only lives in the feces, but it lives in the mucosal membrane. So our intestine, our healthy microbiome exists in a high transit system. So stagnation, like we talked about the Dr. Shinya colonoscopy footage, that's a pathogenic stagnant environment. But when things are high transit, meaning they're moving through, the sweeping waste out, they're coming in, the diverse fiber feeds the beneficial bacteria, and then it moves out. And then the bacterial colonies that remain strong there. But if someone's in a state of stagnation, then you're going to have a stagnant environment. You're going to have more of a pathogenic microbiome. So colonics actually improve the ability for probiotics, whether from our food or from a probiotic supplement, to thrive, to basically thrive in the intestine. So, but yeah, people also made up the idea that, like, colonics are doing something for you and your bowel will get lazy. When in reality, especially doing a gravity colonic, we're actually exercising the bowel. So people tend to go to the bathroom more and more effectively and efficiently when they have repetitive treatments. But I think these are the things people just intellectualized and thought up. There's no study showing that colonics or enemas damage the microbiome. Like, it doesn't even exist. No one's ever even looked at it or studied it, with the exception of the studies I have that shows it improves. But you won't even find a contradictory study on it, because nobody ever did that. Nobody ever looked at the ability, the frequency of bowel movements after getting colonics or enemas, or no one's ever done that. But somehow it's sort of made its way into the conversation. But none of these things are true. They're all myths.
Good to know. All right. Thank you very much. All right, last question from Music Monster Man as well. Oh, and Dulce says, I'm with you, Mike. That's what I do with my 4 children, teaching the way, letting them choose. So there you go.
So important. Yeah, let them have their own experience. Make them, provide healthy food in the container of the home, but just know at some point they're going to have their own lives. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, great advice. Great advice. All right, Music Monster Man says, is salt okay? I just heard David Wolf speaking about sea salt water flushes and their benefits in helping those with autoimmunity. Most vegan doctors say any amount of salt at all is harmful.
Yeah, I'm a big salt advocate. So remember when I was talking earlier about accepting where you are? Yep. Salt does not have to be a part of a natural diet. We can get sodium from things like celery and leaves and things like that. But I realized one day, I was like, I really like using salt in my food. And I was like, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to use the highest quality raw salt. I use Celtic sea salt. It's one of the finest salts in the world. I love it. And my body's acclimated to using salt. A salt flush is a little bit different, because when you drink that salt water in concentration, it has an osmotic effect where it moves through the intestine like a giant saltwater anaconda, and it just kind of moves through and pushes everything out. So that's different than integrating it in food and absorbing it. And you don't actually absorb most of the salts that we drink when we drink like a highly concentrated salt flush drink. But that has a very similar effect to colon cleansing. It's just another way to open up the channels of elimination. You could use different salts, like Epsom salts as well, to flush out the intestines as well. But so yeah, technically salt is not really part of a natural human diet. We don't see, we don't see a lot of our relatives in nature, a lot of the primates, sprinkling salt on their food or things like that. But I think it's one of those things that can be healthy. I think that when we look at, so here's a thing that we really have to understand. And this happens when we even talk about animal food as well. This idea like eating meat's bad, causes cancer, causes heart disease. Well, if somebody eats like me, but 3 times a week I put some chicken strips in my salad, probably not going to get those issues, right?
Sure.
If somebody eats my diet but puts Celtic sea salt in their big raw salad wrap, probably not going to have the same effects as the people that are eating 3 cooked meals a day that are being studied in these studies that are saying that any amount of salt will kill you. So everything is relative, and it's all working synchronistically with what we're doing. There's about a 20% margin of error where we can do things less than ideal, and we can still get the same results that we would, whether or not we're doing the good stuff 80% or 100%. There's a 20% margin of error. So I think using Celtic salt is great. It makes my food taste good and I like it and it makes me happy. So I just do it. And I don't think it affects my health negatively. I don't think it's going to take years off my life or set me up for disease or any of the things. Now, if I were eating 3 cooked meals a day and in breakfast cereal, and even if I'm vegan and I'm eating packaged soy milk and I'm doing all these things and there's all this sodium and salt in the food, it's probably adding to the toxic load of what I'm doing. My body's probably not able to handle it as well. So I get where I'm not saying these studies are wrong. I'm saying there's truth in them, but I think it needs to be dissected a little bit. But if you're eating a diet of mostly unprocessed foods, most of the food, you're doing a good, nice, overnight fast every night, you're hydrated. A lot of the food you have are like fruits and things that already don't have salt in it. And then you put a little salt in your salad dressing. Like, I think, live your life.
Yeah.
At some point, live your life. I know one of my heroes, Dr. Michael Greger, is always coming down on salt and telling people to use potassium salt. And I'm like, at some point, like, I think we just need to know who we are and go like, I'm doing so much better than 1993 Mike Perrine. Like, I'm going to use Celtic salt,
Yeah.
and not because it's so bad, it's just, it's not going to kill me because of everything else in my diet balances everything perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. All right. One last one, quick one here. Valley says, do juice cleanses damage the microbiome?
No, they don't damage it at all. No, they could even improve it. Yeah, things get a little bit weird in the gut because you might not have the same movement that you normally have, and juice residue can be a little weird in the gut, but it's only going to be for 40 days or less, depending on what you do. Some people do like 90-day juice cleanses. Those are good too, but most people don't have to do those. But so it's only a short window of time, but no, they can even improve it. And if you're doing colonics or eliminating well during a juice fast, then they're only going to improve it.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah, and there's a lot of soluble fiber in juice. There's a lot of soluble fiber. You're still feeding the microbiome, even though you're just juicing. But when you're doing a juice cleanse, you're looking to simplify. You're looking to do a systemic, deep tissue cleansing and really take the burden of eating off of the body. And I say burden because our body puts energy and effort and enzymes and chemistry into the digestion of a meal. When you take that away, it allows the body all this free energy to go deeper into the system and clean things up. Water fasting being the ultimate way of doing that, but that's like way advanced. I think people should do that in a more way advanced state. But yeah, juice fasting, that's the goal. So it doesn't mess the microbiome up like an antibiotic would, or that's not going to do anything like that. It would probably only improve conditions because it's going to really allow your body to deeply, effectively cleanse. And even though you have this influx of endogenous waste, if you're getting it out, everything should be smooth, should be good.
Awesome. All right. Valley says, awesome. Thank you. Great information. Same Music Monster Man. Everybody's loving the information you're putting out there. So thank you for answering these questions.
I appreciate you all being here.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, again, another incredible talk and Q&A session. So thank you, Mike. Let's quick do the drawing here. So once again, guys, I still haven't installed the new name picking thing. So I'll get that installed one of these days here. But until then, we're just going to scroll through the chat here and let my mouse decide. So I'm just going to let it go. There it is. It is on Valley Tom. So Valley, you have won any of my ebooks that you would like. You can pick one, and then you're also going to get a bottle of Daily Green Boost if you'd like it. I can get you a code that you have to use within the next 2 weeks in order to get it for free. And then you're also going to get Mike's course, which is called, where did it go?
Cleansing Kitchen Essentials.
Yes, Cleansing Kitchen Essentials. Awesome. Wow. So congratulations, Valley. Just send me a message, an email at matt@myrawintuition.com, and then I will forward you over to Mike, and he can get you set up with that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everybody in the audience. I've really enjoyed this episode, and I'm hoping you all did too. I'm sure you did. And got a lot of great information today from Mike. So Mike, thanks again. Any last words before we log off here?
No, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate you having me on, man. And thanks for dealing with the technical difficulties this morning and getting this going. And I appreciate everyone being here in the chat as well.
Thank you so much. All right, guys. Well, we will see you next week. Same time, same place. We'll have another guest. And hopefully, if there's anybody out there that wants to be on the game show, we can get a game show next week as well. We don't have one today. So send me a message if you want to be on the game show. Send me a message if you have any other questions or anything. And Valley, send me a message to get your gifts. So And again, everybody check out the links of Mike's resources and his website down below. And until next time, always follow your raw intuition.